Tonight, with growing pressure on the government to compensate those injured or even killed as a result of side effects from the Covid-19 vaccine, we have a simple question tonight. Is the Covid-19 vaccine safe? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome virologist Professor George Lomonosov, American infectious disease physician Amish Adaglia, consultant pathologist Dr. Claire Craig, author and journalist Naomi Wolf, and actor John Bowe. Naomi has a book out. We'll be joined by Naomi shortly, and I'll let you know all about her latest book. So let's get to this. Is the Covid-19 vaccine safe? Professor George Lomonosov.
Well, of course, there are actually several different vaccines which have been used. And I think, just looking at the latest figures, a total of about 12 billion doses have been supplied worldwide, and I think more is pushing about 5 billion people have had, the full dose of them, which is getting onto a very large percentage of the population. Now, any treatment, any medical intervention, there are always some risks, but with that sheer number of doses administered, if there were a systematic risk and it was somehow a dangerous thing to do, and remember, of course, COVID itself is a dangerous disease, especially in the vulnerable, I think you'd be seeing several million people reporting these symptoms. But as far as I can tell, and looking at all the the data I can find, there are sad cases where individuals that there is something happens after the vaccination, whether it's directly caused, maybe you'll never know. And certainly if someone's suffering, one wants to help them. But generally, I think the vaccination program has been a very good thing. And any side effects, it might be unpleasant to an individual, have been very minor compared with what, with all vaccines, there is some very slight risk.
Although, Professor Lomonosov, if the vaccine is safe, for example, the AstraZeneca vaccine, why is it not administered to those under 30 in the UK?
Well, you do get certain vaccines or certain treatments are recommended or not recommended for different groups of people. There's not always a panacea. You'll look at, the dose for, say, paracetamol is different for under 12s and above 12s. So you always get that kind of thing because people's immune systems are at different stages at different ages. And so, you don't administer many the COVID vaccines to young infants, possibly in that case because it's just not very effective. So there are all those kind of things. You don't tend to just have a universal formulation for everyone.
Dr. Claire Craig, is the COVID-19 vaccine as innocuous as paracetamol?
Well, no, it's not. Everybody has accepted, the regulators have accepted that there were clotting problems, that the government have a document out about Guillain-Barré syndrome. We know about the myocarditis and pericarditis issues. So, there are some conditions that's absolutely accepted that there have been problems. And the real issue we have is that the problems haven't been measured. So an FOI came out today showing that the CDC had written out a protocol for what was to happen to follow up a signal. And the intention was that they would measure the incidence over time. So you see if something that was rarer has become more common. And they laid this all out very clearly, their methodology, and didn't do it. They didn't do what they said they would do to find the issues. So if they're not looking properly, you won't find them. And what we also saw was a sort of situation with the tail wagging the dog, where there were no deaths related to the vaccine, zero, until the regulators said there was this problem with the brain clots. And then we've had a handful of brain clot deaths that have been certified as being due to the vaccine. So in theory, what should happen is the doctor should be calling it out, and then the regulator can say, we've got an issue here. But the doctors are waiting for the regulator to say it before they're calling it out. And so in that situation, you can't trust the data, but you can see problems in the excess mortality. They're not huge problems, but in the young in particular, there have been too many excess deaths, and that's seen across different countries. And we've had too many cardiac arrest calls, way too many. Now, cardiac arrest calls are fairly common, so to see a signal in the cardiac arrest calls is a really big concern.
Dr. Amesh Adalja, could you tell us whether you think the COVID-19 vaccine is safe?
I think the COVID-19 vaccine is a very safe vaccine. And I think the best way to think about this is the relative risk benefit that you get with the vaccine. You can't just look at the vaccine on its own. You have to think about what COVID-19 represents, how many millions of people that have died from it, and what the risk is of the vaccine versus the benefits you get from the vaccine. And when you look at it, yes, there are some rare side effects like brain cuts that occur that are being addressed, myocarditis that's being addressed. You have to then juxtapose that to the great benefit you get from the vaccine and not look at only one side of it. Often people who talk about the safety of the vaccine don't actually mention any of the benefits, the hundreds of thousands of lives that have been saved by people who have gotten vaccinated, including myself, as soon as I was able to be vaccinated. So I think that when you look at the amount of data that's there and look at the risk and benefit, this vaccine the benefits outweigh the risk in almost every scenario that we can see, because this isn't something we're taking for no reason. We're taking it to fight COVID-19, to prevent COVID-19 from overwhelming our hospitals, and it clearly does that.
John Bowe, you've set up a charity, a GoFundMe page, I believe, that will aim to support the victims of COVID-19 vaccine injuries. What's your view about the safety of the vaccine?
I don't believe it's safe. If you will indulge me, I'd like to read an extract from an article that Dr. Tess Lawrie, who's on the committee of the World Council for Health, which I predict in the future will take over from the World Health Organization when that is finally discredited. It's a brief statement. There is a mountain of evidence, including the testimonies of so many who have been harmed, to show that these injections are not fit for purpose. They do not work, they are not safe, they systematically destroy our immune system, and they contain secret ingredients that have not been disclosed to the public, purportedly to protect pharmaceutical manufacturers' commercial interests. But what about our interests? What about informed consent? Now, all these esteemed and extremely well-qualified people have made their comments about the vaccine, but we're only talking about so far. Already we have myocarditis, pericarditis, we have terrible skin rashes and blisters, we have thromboses, blood clotting, there's some cases of spongiform encephalitis, and now certain pathologists are talking, and people who've been doing autopsies and post-mortems are suggesting that we're coming into a period of accelerated cancers and other problems. I mean, we don't know where this is going to go.
Well, John, when we get to accelerated cancers, are we not in the world of speculation at that point?
Yes, of course. But they're seeing it already. I don't need to justify what I'm saying because we're in a situation a bit like during the pandemic. You know, did somebody die with COVID or of COVID? This muddied the whole water. And now, because the VAERS system was a complete failure, the yellow card system is a complete failure. I mean, I don't know of any relative of mine who was asked before they were injected, here's your yellow card. Do you know about the yellow card system? Can you go to the... No one was ever asked. So this is a complete bogus assessment of what's happened to people.
George,
I worry about where it's going.
Yeah, George Lomonosov, my personal view is that if you're 75 or 80 with a high body mass index and asthma, you'd be stark raving mad not to have the vaccine. But the vast majority of the healthy population don't need it, so why take the risk even if it's a rare one?
Well, you can probably argue about that against the vaccine, against any disease, that a given individual is probably, the odds are against you getting it. But it's all about, or in a serious way. The trouble is you continue to transmit it and you make life much worse for those who are vulnerable. I mean, they basically have to hasn't that ship passed already, the idea that the COVID-19 vaccine stops transmission, Professor Lomonosov? Bill Gates himself, an investor in vaccines, has been, he said, quite disappointed about the fact that the vaccine doesn't stop transmission. Well, I mean, it's not perfect, that's for sure. I mean, it's not 100% effective. So, of course, that's not going to, completely eliminate it. You'll still get it. But it does certainly seem to knock down the rate of transmission and also, of course, stop such serious diseases. And you made a comment about paracetamol. That wasn't just a facetious comment I made. There's quite a lot of people die every year through paracetamol poisoning. And it's actually, in some ways, a drug of suicide. So that, even something as apparently innocuous as that can have side effects.
Amesh Adalja, nobody has convinced me as to why the healthy population need this vaccine.
The healthy population, I recommend, get this vaccine because why suffer through COVID-19? Even if it doesn't land you in the hospital, even if you don't get severe disease, why would you want to have a more severe case of it than you needed to? Why not be on your feet faster? Why not have it be an innocuous illness? Why not have to call off work? There's so many diseases that we vaccinate for that don't have a big impact on the person getting vaccinated, but they're almost like a nuisance infection. We vaccinate for chickenpox in the United States.
Sure, but it's
so
an
I think
innocuous.
That's why I would recommend people get vaccinated.
It's an innocuous disease for most anyway. Even at the start of the pandemic, with the early COVID variants, the British government was saying that a third of people will have no symptoms. They said, act like you've got it. That doesn't sound like a virus for which everybody should be vaccinated.
Well, I think that not everybody has asymptomatic infection, and there are people who are tired, coughing, have fevers and chills. Why not prevent that? What's wrong with the vaccine? The vaccine is safe and effective. Why not prevent yourself from getting that infection? And there is some proportion of people that do get long COVID symptoms that we don't quite understand. But the thing is, we're talking about a safe and effective vaccine. This is not as if this vaccine has major side effects that outweigh its benefit. And I think why not prevent this infection if you can prevent it with a vaccine that is easy to take?
How can it be safe and effective? How can it be safe and effective when it lasts for about 7 weeks, I believe? You can tell me whether or not that is true. Effectively lasts for about 7 weeks, and your body's filled with millions of mRNA spike proteins, which it takes the body, I believe, you can tell me whether this is true, because I'm not a doctor, you tell me whether this is true, it takes the body at least 12 to 13 months to flush these spike proteins out of the system. That's
completely not true. And What's important to remember is, yes, the protection against infection may wear off in several weeks, especially with Omicron variants. But your protection against severe disease, hospitalization, and death is intact. And it does make you less likely to get infected. And I think that what's going on here is people are just minimizing the benefits of this vaccine and really only looking at the harms that they have picked up, the misinformation about this vaccine, and much of it is being asserted in the absence of evidence or in defiance of evidence.
Is it misinformation that the mRNA spike proteins cause blood clots?
What we know is that certain blood clots are occurring in people who got the Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca vaccine.
Is it just coincidence?
John, let the doctor speak.
So blood clots can occur in rare circumstances with certain of the vaccines, AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson vaccines. But I think it's also important to remember that the virus itself causes blood clots, including strokes and pulmonary emboli and blood clots in the legs. People minimize what COVID-19 can cause and then only focus on one side of this equation when they go after these vaccines, which I think are some of the safest vaccines with the most transparency that we've ever seen. I think we're in a real danger now of attacking vaccines, attacking science and the scientists and the rationality and the reason behind them with this kind of these arbitrary assertions that are made without any kind of evidence, without any kind of experience of taking care of COVID-19 patients, which I've been doing since the very beginning of this pandemic and was in the hospital even today. I think that there's just so much wrong with this debate and the way it's being framed that I think that science is going to be under siege for some time. And we're already seeing this bleed into our influenza vaccination campaigns, our measles vaccination campaigns. This is just something that we never thought we would really be facing at this stage in the pandemic, because people actively going against science.
Well, Dr. Ajala, I completely understand what you're saying about that, but isn't it because of things like vaccine mandates where people lost their job if they didn't get the vaccine? Surely the policy, the strategy around vaccines should have been, here's the nature of the disease, the vaccine is available, take it or leave it, as is the case with all other vaccines.
I think that the policy prescriptions of government mandating vaccines was wrong. It created a backlash. It gave a lot of the anti-vaccine people fodder. I think the vaccines sell themselves. They are so valuable that they shouldn't need to be mandated. And I think mandates by the government really have no place when it comes to vaccination. And that's a separate issue. And I think that there are major policy failures that have emboldened the anti-vaccine groups, unfortunately.
Well, yes, and I think that's the issue, isn't it, Claire Craig? It's the coercive nature of the rollout which makes people concerned about having the jab.
Absolutely. The way it's been pushed, the way that people have been patronised has meant people have totally lost faith in public health. Public health has played a terrible, terrible role with this. And I'd like to come back on two of the other points that were made, if I may. One of them is that the doctor there was trying to really emphasise the pathology caused by the spike protein, which is absolutely the case. The spike protein causes all sorts of pathology. It interacts with the endothelial cells. It causes the clotting. It can go into the brain. It's a horrible, horrible protein. And he's recommending injecting people with it. That's what he's recommending. Now, and just to talk about him claiming that it saved thousands of lives, which people keep banding around this claim, it's absolute nonsense. You just compare geographical regions next door to each other with high and low vaccination rates. We've got Eastern Europe, which has a huge range of vaccination rates, no difference in excess deaths, none. The excess deaths were the same. Israel, Palestine, massive difference. Excess deaths are the same. You can do the same with counties around the USA. You can do the same in any way. You know that the claim does not stand up. It just does not stand up.
George Lomonosov, I'm triple jabbed, but I believe it's got to be personal choice as to whether you have the vaccine. I don't think it's right that in order to travel or go to work that you should have had to have the vaccine. Personal choice has got to be the way forward. Have we not also, in the course of this pandemic, ignored the issue of natural immunity, the fact that for the healthy population to get COVID is the ultimate vaccine? You get COVID, you recover, and you have great antibodies.
Well, that was one thought that might happen, but sadly, with the various new Omicron strains, natural infections don't seem to be that great at protecting you. So people don't fully understand why the strains vary in such a way. But you can certainly get it again. And that's something which has, in a sense, been a bit disappointing. It's not like, say, measles or chickenpox or something that, you get lifelong immunity. And that's obviously connected to it wearing off, which will happen with the vaccine as well. So that's why you get repeated and boosted. But it is an issue. I mean, the point is about vaccines, you do give them to healthy people. They're prophylactic. I mean, you don't wait until somebody's ill. And I'll just put a contrast with the current situation. I mean, I'm old enough, to be aware of, the polio situation in the 50s. But, in the UK, I mean, people who got polio, and everyone's heard of it, and you can think of Ian Jury, the victim of polio, it was a few hundred a year. But that didn't stop people saying, we'll have a vaccination campaign against it. Because it's, we want to eliminate that. And you're giving that, initially a killed vaccine, then a live attenuated one, to prevent, even those matter of hundreds a year, to prevent that horrible scourge. And so it seems an odd thing to say we don't want to do that now with diseases.
The clock is against us. Final thoughts, John Bowe?
The doctor to my right was very dismissive and didactic about misinformation and disinformation, but I always thought that science was about debate. OK, don't debate me, I'm just an actor. But debate Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Pierre Corey, Dr. Robert Malone, Dr. Ryan Cole. Why don't we ever see those people in this debate? And you talk about myocarditis. It can be caused by COVID as well, but it's a different kind of myocarditis that you get with COVID than you get with the injections. And I got that from a cardiologist.
Yes, I mean, Dr. Adalja, I want you to share your concluding thoughts, picking up on what John has said. But also, I mean, I know it's easy to choose isolated examples, but it was well reported that the award-winning BBC radio presenter Lisa Shaw died of COVID vaccine complications. This was days after her first AstraZeneca dose. She was a slim woman in good health at the age of 44. The bottom line is, and I know it's an isolated example, but if she hadn't had the vaccine, she'd still be with us. And she, in her profile, is not someone that needed the vaccine.
I think that there are tragic cases where individuals have severe side effects, but when you're looking at the vaccine program as a whole, you have to weigh the risks and the benefits. And there are always going to be rare cases where something may happen really tragically, and as happened in the case that you're presenting. But that doesn't erase the benefit that the vaccine provides overall. And I think we've understood why the AstraZeneca vaccine has that risk. And I would just, a couple of last comments. You talked about the spike protein. The best way to get spike protein through your body is actually getting infected. So that's, if you're worried about what the spike protein does to your body, the best way to prevent that from happening is be vaccinated. And on myocarditis, it is very different, the myocarditis you get from COVID, than the vaccine. The vaccine-induced myocarditis is very transient, very mild, does not cause severe complications. So it is a much better type of myocarditis to get anyway. But I think in general,
my cardiologist said exactly the opposite.
Well, it is different, but it's a milder myocarditis. You can look at the data on the patients that have had myocarditis from the vaccine. It is mild. They do not have severe complications. They are transiently hospitalized, very different than myocarditis cases from COVID-19, which I've taken care of both.
A debate that will continue. What a fascinating and important conversation. I'm grateful to all of you for your good manners and ability to listen to opposing points of view. My thanks to virologist Professor George Lomonosov, US infectious disease physician Amesh Adalja, consultant pathologist Dr. Claire Craig, and actor and campaigner John Bowe, who has set up a GoFundMe page. John, what's the web page?
Charity organisation for the vaccine injured. It's justgiving.com/crowdfunding/John Bowe actor. Help us, please.
Lots more to come after this.